Okay, everyone, let's continue with our next panel discussion here on the procurement stage. This is the Spend Management Strategies panel sponsored by Finexio. So let me welcome our panel for this discussion. First of all, on the far side, we are joined by Lilia Richardsky, Senior Director, Category Management and Procurement Operations at Best Buy. Next, we have Chuck Hatsis, CPO at CME Group. Then Abijit Supekar, Senior Director, Global Supply Chain at AVA Technologies. And closest to me, Chris Wyatt, Chief Strategy Officer at Finexio. A warm welcome to our panel, please. I always have to take an extraordinarily deep breath before going through everyone's job titles. So there were some relatively short ones in there, which I'm very, very grateful for. Right. You know the drill by now. We like to start with a 30-second introduction to all of our speakers, just so everyone gets to know each other. So, well, Lilia, I'll let you start first. 30 seconds from you, please.
Wonderful. Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Lilia Richardsky. I'm a Senior Director at Best Buy. There are a couple of roles that I have at Best Buy. I lead our procurement operations team, our procurement governance team, and I also have one of our teams that is responsible for category management. That is marketing. I'm a seasoned procurement careerist. I've been with procurement for about 20 years and had a number of category management roles. Marketing is what I do now. I've done technology over the years, and I've done a number of procurement transformation kind of roles. Love the space. There's so much to do, and excited to speak with you today.
Thank you, Lilia. Chuck.
Yes, hi, Chuck Hatsis. I am the CPO at CME Group. CME Group is the largest financial exchange of commodities and derivatives. I lead a global team. We've got some of our members here in the Chicago team. We've got some folks in London and Bangalore. Prior to being on the corporate side, I did management consulting in the space as well.
Thank you, Chuck. Abhi.
Hey, everybody. My name is Abijit Supekar. Call me Abhi. I head up supply chain for AVA. We make 4D LiDARs. My role is divided in three aspects: strategic sourcing, materials management, and end-to-end logistics. And it's been a great journey here. So about 20 years or so in supply chain, and definitely looking forward to a couple more.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Chris.
Hey everybody, Chris Wyatt, Chief Strategy Officer, co-founder of Finexio. Spent better part of 20 years in the payment space. In particular, Finexio is really focused on what we think of as the last mile of the procurement process. So Finexio works with a lot of large procurement platforms that are here and not here, and really what we try to do is facilitate actually executing payments to suppliers and vendors safely, efficiently. If we can monetize those, we do that very well. And so we're moving tens of billions of dollars a year, and really just trying to make a lot of those AP teams' lives a little bit easier, because what we see is that the clerical process that still exists when it comes to actually facilitating the payment. Once you've done a lot of the very sort of cool, innovative, AI-driven sort of work streams that are upstream from typical payments, we'd love to see how we can help make life a little bit easier. So we'll get into it, but I'm sure.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. And if you do want to read any more about our speakers, just go onto the app, which I'm sure you have all downloaded by now. You have? Good. Excellent. That definitely helps. Let's move on to a bit of context to start with, and the change we've all seen in spend management strategies during your time in procurement. Lilia, I'll start with you. What are the main changes you've seen?
I was thinking about this question as I was preparing. And I went back about 20 years ago, and I honestly couldn't believe what I was remembering, because I actually blacked it out of my head. But as recently as 10 years ago, I remember everything being so manual. Every purchase order, every invoice, how I was getting from department to department was just manual. When I was starting, I remember as a director in a large, sophisticated organization, having piles of invoices that I had to every day sign by hand. And then I would get additional approvals if those were mandated by policy, put it in an intercompany envelope, and send it to our AP department. And as I was thinking about this, I honestly couldn't believe that was real, but it was. And in between, there were a number of us who were trying to be strategic, right? We would do all of that work and think about our category strategies. Now we're in a different world, right? Where it's all automated. We still have the challenge of how do we become really strategic, but we don't have all of those manual tasks if we're doing our jobs right.
I can almost feel that pile of invoice stress streams coming through in your voice there. It's so important for us to look back, I think, about where we've come from here. Chuck, your thoughts. What are those big changes for you?
So I think a lot of the fundamentals are unchanged, and that is, change starts with some sort of a change imperative, which is something good happens if we change or something bad happens if we don't change. And so I think it needs to start with that. And then from there, I think it's just a matter of laying out a clear vision of here's where we are, here's where we're going, here are the logical steps to get there, and there is a good place to be. And so I think that the difference is probably how that information is now communicated. It used to be somebody in the front of a town hall. Now I think it's more cascaded. I think there's more mediums available to communicate messages, whether it's things where people can respond to the information that's put out there. So I think that's probably the biggest change is just kind of the mediums of communication.
But it's also interesting what you say there about what has stayed the same, some of those fundamentals. That's also fascinating. Abhi, your thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about change and, change a little bit different from what you both mentioned. I was thinking about it was being more top-down, always everything being told to do, fear-based, I guess, and compliance required more than a change required for the future of the company, the future of your team, future of something. And I believe that's the change that I've seen across supply chain procurement and strategic sourcing is what I call it now always, is that it's always data-driven. The change is happening because there is some data associated with that you want to achieve or you want to deliver. And I think that mindset change is phenomenally different. The other thing that I've realized as a change from my experiences is how the change was communicated. Again, a top-down approach of, hey, this is what we're doing, and generally no more reasons behind that. It was just told what to do. But more so now it's organically driven, where teams are coming up with recommendations of what we need to do and why we need to do. And it's a context-based discussion. So even if the communication may still happen in a all-hands meeting or a top-down approach in an email, but the content of that email, the content of that conversation is a bottoms-up, organically grown content, which I believe also helps in application and utilization of that.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I guess I'll pile on to the sort of communication being a sort of powerful lever for change. And we've certainly seen it with the organizations that we work with, be it anything from email, phone, obviously Zoom. Everybody knows about Zoom ever since COVID. I think before that, some of us did. Things like Slack. And so we work with a lot of organizations where, you've got multi-modes to communicate at any given time. And I think that also really plays well into, establishing better relationships, just having better communication channels. And then even for recall, right? I'm sure we'll get into AI a little bit, but one of the things we've seen, internally and externally is you're having all these Zoom meetings, right? Now you have instant summaries. You know what was discussed. You don't really forget anything. Or if you do, it's your fault. Yeah. There's really no need to forget anything. But I think that really helps just facilitate sort of, better interaction between companies, your procurement process, and it's sort of on that path towards efficiency. Certainly not to say that we're there. We still see lots of paper, with companies we deal with and manual processes. But I think the fact that, folks like you are here, looking at, what can we do better, really speaks to where the industry is headed. And, obviously more room for improvement, but I think we're well on our way.
Yes, I'll return to cliche number one. It is a journey. We're all on a journey, and I promise never to use that word again. I do apologise. Let's move on, though, to the key components of an effective modern spend management strategy. I'm going to put you all on the spot a little bit here because I'd love you to pick out the things that you feel need to be there for that strategy to be effective. Chuck, I'll start with you. What would you want to service? Yeah,
I still kind of go back to that change paradigm. There's got to be a reason to change. There's got to be a logical path to get there. I think that the leaders got to get that message out. That's got to be cascaded and repeated. And I think that's all required to have it stick at the end.
Abhi?
Yeah. What I think is from a spend management aspect, there are two aspects that have remained unchanged to the point that he made, right? If there's a need for change, then there has to be a change. But what has not changed is the need for the accuracy of the data that you have and the access to the data. That is a fundamental need of the system itself, and we have to have that. But from a components of what we would like to have, we're looking at things that are associated with real-time usage, looking at collaborative stuff that goes into making the data sets accurate, and essentially driving the visibility, availability, and flexibility of the data.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I think there's any number of things we could focus on. One that has been near and dear to our hearts, unfortunately, is fraud management. So making sure you know who you're dealing with, being able to spot things like deep fakes that are very prevalent now, right? Because we're in the business of making sure money gets where it needs to go, so that your suppliers and vendors are paid sort of on time, and you're not paying a bad guy. And so we've spent an inordinate amount of time, and we see this with a lot of our customers, a lot of the procurement platforms we work with, where really making sure you know who's on the other end, right? So if somebody's calling up to say, hey, I need to make a change, send the money over here instead, that you really know who you're dealing with. And this change, I feel like, is almost revolutionary at this point, for good and bad, right? Again, with AI, ChatGPT, I'm sure you guys are all using it, to some degree within your organization, but we've seen a lot of, very good deep fakes that are out there that, try to get perpetrated. So I think that it's fascinating to see, and then just what every organization is doing to, try to keep up and get in front of it.
Yeah, fascinating and also slightly terrifying. We could do an entire discussion on that on its own. Lilia?
I think, to me, there are four key components to spend management. One is they all have to work together simultaneously, and you have to constantly refine them to make them better and working together. So the first is your organization. If you're a procurement function, you have to know who within your function is going to do which roles of spend management. You've got your strategic roles, you have your operational roles. That has to be clear and set up for success. Second one is your processes. As you think about the whole spend management process, they have to be clearly laid out, working with your organization in support of your objectives. Third one is your technology. Your technology will not function on its own without the right processes and without the right data. And fourth is policy. You have to be supported by the policy. All of these working together, you can't really prioritize any one of them over the other. And you have to constantly tweak, right? Your technology versus your organization on an ongoing basis.
That's a very, very good summary. If I could just make a quick request to the facilities and stage management team, if we could just move the podium, please, because I think for about a third of the room, Lilia is currently hidden. She is there, I promise. Thank you very much. If I just move on to some of the biggest hurdles and challenges, though, in that organisations face when trying to manage their spend effectively. Everyone's wanting to reach that point where they've got an effective strategy in place. What are the main blockers from it actually happening? Abby, I'll start with you.
Yeah, from a challenges perspective, I think it goes back to the fundamental topic that I said, accuracy and access of data. I believe that, to quote it, maybe 99% of the organizations still struggle with that. The issue is there is no single source of truth for the data, and hence the POs might, you might have multiple codes coming in, but what order was placed at what quantity was different, and so there are always errors that can be introduced into the system. So the accuracy of the data to actually reflect the reality, and the access of data to make sure that the right people have access to it, is always the fundamental problem. But in addition to that, as we are moving faster in terms of what we need to drive results in procurement, real-time access is something that is always missing, and that is fundamentally driven by the need of the data, by need of what's happening in the world. The third problem that I always think about is how do we ensure that we can scenario plan stuff? That's a challenge that is missing because as various spend situations arrive, maybe it's a tariff situation or maybe it's a oil and gas crisis. It doesn't matter. Point is that if you had a scenario you could play out, you should be able to still figure out how do we get into that. And this is something that is fundamentally is what we are trying to drive as our part of my organization in the company today. We are trying to figure this out to how do we build real-time insights into the system so that we can drive something that is more meaningful to the organization.
Thank you, Abby. And I will say, whoever had 1119 on tariff bingo, as in the first person to mention tariffs, it was 1119, collect your prize at the back of the room. There is no prize at the back of the room. Made it up. Shouldn't have done. Let me continue. Chris.
Yeah, certainly agree with Abby. You know, data being really critical to being able to run an efficient operation, enterprise. But I think one of the bigger things we typically see is a lot of institutional inertia just preventing progress or slowing down progress. It's like this is the way things have been done. It's very sometimes costly to change, or even mentally costly to change. To introduce new technology, new processes, all of which probably are very valid, and we should all be doing it. But I can tell you any number of very, very large institutions we work with, have processes that you can't even imagine. They're so backwards and sort of arcane, and then getting folks to want to change, and then ultimately to be able to facilitate that change. It's not easy, right? I mean, there's a lot that goes into evolving processes, making sure you've got it's well documented, it complies with whatever your compliance rules and regs are. So I think that'll continue to be a challenge, despite the fascinating technology that's coming out. But we're all making progress.
I think it would be remiss of me not to pick up on that expression of institutional inertia. What a wonderful expression. And I think it's something that a lot of people in this room will have seen and heard wherever they've worked. People know something needs to change. They've got an idea of what they need to do to change it, but they can't get it over the line. Chris, if we can just double click on that for a second, your thoughts on how people can move past that sort of scenario.
Yeah, I think one sort of open mindset. I do think there's probably, we also see as a generational shift happening. So a lot of the millennials, et cetera, that are coming in are, definitely just more open to technology. They grew up with it. It's not so, so much of a foreign concept. So we've certainly seen, that be a catalyst for sort of change and shift and openness to leveraging technology, right? I mean, I think if you sort of use all the technology that's out there, you might not have any paper processes. Now, that's not going to happen because a lot of these organizations have been around for, tens, hundreds of years, potentially. But I think as you sort of look to, becoming more efficient, it's embracing technology where it makes sense. But for us, often what we see is it's people, process, and then technology. So making sure you got the right people that are helping to push the appropriate processes that evolve. Even if it's a terrible manual paper-based process that you get into Excel or get into some type of digital workflow, and then ultimately leveraging the technology that your organization needs, because not everybody needs everything that's available. You really need what is going to make your company more successful.
Thank you. I've gone off on a tangent there. I do apologize. Lilia.
Yeah, I like that term, institutional inertia, a lot. I was thinking about some of our challenges, and it's a little bit of this inertia, but I kind of think about it, this almost paralysis that happens because the task is so complex. So as a leader in the organization, you've got so many things that you could be doing. Risk mitigation, you can be dual sourcing to mitigate your risk. You can manage your suppliers differently. What about supplier diversity? So the list goes on and on of all the things you could be doing, and just that complexity of all those opportunities, and then how to get it done, I do think paralyzes a lot of us, right? Because you don't know where to start. And one thing that I found, it's just this old adage, right? You do it one step at a time, but you do have to understand where you're going first. How do you kind of clear that noise of everything you could be doing and create a clear roadmap for yourself of what the steps you have to take to achieve your next goal.
Thank you. Chuck.
Yeah, I think some of the biggest challenges to spend management in an organization is sometimes the culture of the company, and I heard you kind of say organizational inertia. Sometimes that's a function of misaligned incentives, but often it's a function of trust, right? So are the business partners viewing us as trusted advisors, or do they feel like we're coming in with some sort of an agenda that might not be the same as theirs? And if you don't have kind of all those oars rowing in the same direction, it's suboptimal.
Where I'd like to go next, if I can, and it's something we've briefly touched on with the mention of tariffs and so forth, Yeah, there is so much complexity within global supply chains at the moment. The sands are permanently moving, let's say. How does that affect spend management strategies when things are so volatile at the moment? Chris, if I could start with you on that one, your thoughts?
Sure. So we see a lot of organizations that we work with sort of hedging, not really knowing exactly what to do. Certainly if it comes up to foreign exchange, we have a lot of corporates, working with us, talking about how do we better manage, our FX spend, doing it efficiently. Are we, getting other currencies on board, banking them, and there's not a good answer, unfortunately. I think, as it relates to what's going on with the tariff world, it seems like it changes every few hours, which really makes it difficult to plan. But more than anything, it's flexibility. So one of the things we really pride ourselves on is, creating flexible solutions for organizations that have sort of global needs, cross-border payment needs. And I actually think it's a fascinating space that we'll continue to see more and more, technology like stable coins, et cetera, come into play, where it makes those transactions that much easier, more transparent, and clear, but still work to be done. And I wish I could say we're sort of out of the woods yet, but I think give it a little bit longer, and we'll see where the dust settles.
I think if one person did have the answer to that particular question and we got that on tape, on video, that would do extraordinarily well online. So unfortunately not. Lilia, your thoughts on that?
I think it's obviously it's a big question, but it's bigger in certain areas than others. And one thing we didn't touch on yet is category management and the role that it plays within spend management overall. But category management is critical because an issue like tariffs is going to impact one category significantly and needs to be top priority, and it will leave some other categories completely untouched. So what we're focusing on is on our category managers and how to enable them to actually think strategically about things that impact their space, and then surface that in a way that actually makes an impact for the organization. I think we're doing quite a good job of that. So category managers, if they have the resources to do their research, they will be enabled to make the right decisions, coupled with technology. So if our technology can capture how much are we spending in tariffs, then the two can really work together. Of course, we're still figuring this out, but I do think we're on the right path.
Thank you. Chuck.
So the best thing I've seen on the complexity is there's a video, if you YouTube it, if you query Milton Friedman pencil, and it was filmed like 10 years ago, and he kind of says, here's a pencil. The paint was from this country, the wood is from this country, the rubber eraser is from this country, the metal is from this country, but yet it all comes together through global trade and happens. And it was trying to illustrate the complexities of trying to actually enforce a tariff plan. Like, how would you put a tariff on that pencil? And it's a pencil, right? I mean, we have a lot more complex items than that we're dealing with. So, I don't know if there's any great answers other than, try to think of scenarios, that would be troubling, so that if and when it happens, you pre-thought it at least.
That is an absolutely perfect example. Abby, your thoughts?
What I think is complexity is kind of ingrained into the supply chain and procurement world, right? It's a many-to-many relationships. You have one, it's not one OEM working with one supplier. You have many OEMs working with many suppliers, and they have their own way of doing the work. So complexity is by default ingrained into it. And it gets even further complex because now you have your data that comes in as unstructured, because everybody puts their data in different formats, different currencies maybe, or different just date formats, just depending on what part of the world you are in, right? The unstructured data. And then on top of that, you have fragmented supply chains where a product within the company may be working towards in a certain region with regionalization. The other product might be doing it globalization, depending on whatever their product needs are. So, as I said, complexity is ingrained into it. What I define this is, I call it the triple helix supply chain DNA. Fancy sound wording, but it really is. It's the complexity, it's the gradient of the how structured or unstructured things are, and it's a cohesion of how fragmented unfragmented systems are. So at the end of the day, it's the complexity is ingrained, and the question is, how do we deal with this triple helix thing which is intertwined, and that's the best path forward for us to go if we were thinking about strategies to solve the problem.
That is a wonderful way of explaining it. I want to go on to solutions next, and a really, frankly, a meaty bit of this conversation is about technology, because in any strategy, spend management strategy, there's going to be technology, there's going to be an improvement in technology probably involved as well, if you want to move the dial at all in your strategy. So what role does tech play in improving spend management, and what difference do the right tools make? I think that's the key word. Lilia, can I start with you?
Yeah. Technology, it is that foundational layer to any procurement transformation and in general to managing your spend well. Like I said before, it has to work very closely together with all of the other components. But technology has to serve its role in a way that is almost seamless to the end user. Technology has to enable and make things easy to find, especially if you work in a large organization and you're hoping for compliance. Technology has to be the last thing they think about. It just makes it easy. And on the back end, technology has to provide you with the right insights. So it's all about capturing that data and actually producing it in ways that you are able to make decisions on it. I do think it's still evolving with as much technology as out there. It's a little bit less mature than I think one would think, but it's getting there. This piece about making sure that the data isn't just sitting there, but it's producing you with the relevant insights for leaders is something to stress importance of the most.
I love that point there about not really talking about technology. It's just got to work. At our Tech and AI Live event in London a couple of weeks ago, a CTO whose name escapes me, which is deeply rude of me. I interview a lot of people, give me a break. He said he calls it the Fight Club principle, as in a CTO or a technology officer should never actually talk about technology. So it's a little bit like Fight Club, maybe not as glamorous or violent. But Chuck, move on to you. Your thoughts on technology?
So I think technology used to be something that made our life and work easier. Now it's a survival requirement. I don't know if any of you are getting headcount ads to your teams, but I don't see a lot of headcount ads. So technology frees up capacity for us to take on higher value work, or in some cases just handle the additional volume or the additional complexity that's coming our way that I think that we see. And I think that the value that it's providing is it's allowing us to more quickly get to actionable insights. So if you kind of think of one end of the spectrum of you've got data, then you've got information, and then you've got insight, and then you've got actionable insight. And I think the right technology lets you get more quickly to that actionable insight.
I love that roadmap. That is absolutely true. Abby, your thoughts?
Just a couple of weeks ago, I learned one term, highly trained parrot. I'm going to be acting that for these two folks out here. What Lilia just mentioned was we started with talking about stuff that was invoices on paper and packing and doing that, as that's a change that technology is bringing, I guess. The other day, I saw this picture of a Chicago's skyline where the architects are actually drawing it on a piece of paper that's probably the length of this room and trying to figure out how and what buildings are going to be. It's just phenomenal how technology is fundamental. In our space here, to Lilia's example, it could be making our lives easier by doing the job of having a data transparency, digitization, and real-time information. More importantly, I think that technology is also at the core of how it brings the teams together. It should not be a reason why teams are getting isolated, but actually working together and cross-functionally doing it better.
Thank you. And Chris, I'm sure this is a particular subject you are itching to get stuck into, so I'll open the floor to you.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I think Lily and Chuck, both hit on a couple of things. So certainly, I think we don't see a lot of hiring happening. In fact, a lot of non-hiring, attrition, letting folks go, and then not necessarily even rehiring, putting people back in those positions because of technology, because of what's happening. We think it's fascinating in terms of what's happening, and I think, again, I'm sure we'll talk more about AI, but as you get into it and start thinking about the role of agentic AI that's coming, where it's not the AI, the ML, all the stuff that you guys have been using has more been there to help you make better decisions. What's going to start happening is it's going to just start doing all the work, especially for some of those lower level tasks. There's a lot of technology that's out there that's really interesting. So I think they're exactly right. A, it has to be helpful. I think back to Lilia's point. You can't just throw technology on top of technology and think that it's going to, lead to a better outcome. It has to be, used appropriately. And then I think there's just the world of we're going to be hiring less people and or not replacing people that leave because technology can fill in some of those gaps. And so I think, sort of embracing that, but, doing it pragmatically and thoughtfully is going to be where things go. And I think we're really just at the cusp of, this sort of inflection point that we're going to see a lot more, I might hate to say it, like robots, doing a lot more of the sort of the grunt work, which for many of us is great. For some, it might be a little daunting, but I think it's coming nonetheless.
Well, where I wanted to go next is about emerging trends and the evolution ahead. So, Chris, it's almost like we planned this. You set me up perfectly for that question. I'll start with you, Chuck, if I can, and how you see the emerging trends shaping the future of spend management strategies.
Yeah,
is it too easy to say it's going to be AI, and then we move on to our next question, or is there more to it than that?
No, I think that, if we look in the next 5 years, I think, everything that's like a monthly report right now is going to get automated and pushed out. I think that we'll have bot-to-bot negotiations of MSAs with, fallback clauses on both sides that, get you to the finish line faster. And then I just think that we're going to be, incorporating the technology tools, the AI tools as assistants, because I don't see them replacing humans. I see them supplementing and complementing what we can do. And I think that's going to probably be pretty commonplace.
Thank you. Abhi.
I'll actually dig a bit deeper than the far end of it, but at the front end, it's, I think from an AI perspective, it will change how designs are done. Especially with the mandates for design for cost as an example, where engineers are now going to be able to upload their CADs and get a cost estimate. That's what is happening in the world that we live today. But that will just get even better. Like today we just get the cost. Tomorrow it might be a cost and a supplier, and with the capabilities associated with that, with a future iteration or revisions that we should be looking at. So I think it's driving a fundamental change across every single space. Right? The cost is not an afterthought; it's designed into the product. So if you impact it at the start of the system itself, that's what then gets documented into our systems. That's get translated into the PO process and the payment process across the board, and eventually, when coming to the reports that are being generated, they're all coming through a single source of truth that's talking together. All of this while looking at corporate initiatives that could be around sustainability, ESG, or other activities that might need to happen would be automatically then be able to achieve those with that compliance needed for that. So I think it's a more than just a pretty report at the end, but I think it's a fundamental change across the board is what I see.
Thank you. Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've heard a lot about autonomous commerce, et cetera. And I'll be sort of self-serving, but one of the things we see happening, and again, sort of at that last mile, once you've procured everything you need to do, your POs have matched your invoices, you've done your three-way matching, et cetera, and it's time to pay. What we still see are a lot of organizations sort of manually doing payments, sending checks over here, logging onto the bank to do some of this. They may work with a partner to do components of that, but what we see, and it's not just us, that all just becoming automated. So where you and your team don't need to worry about how the bills are actually getting paid, but those invoices are getting paid the best possible way to take advantage of things like payment terms, or they'll take a particular type of payment that they're willing to take a discount for, or in some cases, they're willing to wait. So, okay, we'll still send a check. We don't like checks, but they'll take a check, and that gives us, more cash on hand. We can earn some interest on float as an example. Yeah. And I think that's just one sort of very small silo of where we see technology really trying to make things more efficient and effective.
Lilia.
I'm excited about, we're each getting better at automating specific elements of our process, such as what Chris just talked about, where things start to happen automatically without human interference. I'm excited about that, the fact that we're very close to getting it done. And a lot of us are also getting close to having our data in one place. So kind of the next trend that I see coming is when you take advantage of things like AI, is actually being able to analyze all that data and come up with actionable insights. I think the reality of what's happening is we have made so much progress, we have so much data, that it is very difficult for humans to actually do something with it. But AI gives us the promise of now being able to analyze it much quicker, give us those insights, and then we can take appropriate action.
Yeah, it's all about those actionable insights. Right, I know I've barely scratched the surface of the things I wanted to talk about, but let's go to the room. Do we have any brief questions from the room that we can weave into the conversation? Again, this is where people tend to stretch, adjust their hair, or just throw me outrageous fakes to keep me on my toes. Right, I'm going to go with my last question. I'm going to put you on your toes a little bit with this one. I'd love one example each about what leaders need to be doing now with their spend management strategies to get them on point. What is your one bit of advice or one thought or observation? And I'm putting you on the spot. Who shall I start with? Chuck, you're looking away from me, so I'll start with you.
Let me toss my hair, okay? I think we have to embrace it. The analogy I use is that we're cutting our lawns with scissors, and we've got access to this big John Deere tractor, so let's use it. Let's be the wind. Let's not be blown around by the wind. So I think we have to embrace it. And it actually could turn into an opportunity, because if you think about where all the data is, it's in our backyards. And if we're able to use these tools and show how they can be used, I don't see any reason why we can't do that to help other parts of the organization. So I think there's actually a lot of opportunity in it.
Yeah, I love that analogy. And if anyone is joining us here from John Deere, they probably enjoy that reference as well. Abby, your thoughts?
I believe that we all have our unique DNAs for our supply chain. I call, like I said, the triple helix supply chain DNA. I think we all need to analyze that for ourselves, and as an operator, you should know what your DNA looks like. Don't be fooled by a nice graphic that shows that, hey, implement this tool and you'll get the solution and all your problems will evaporate. I don't think that single pill exists. We have to take it step by step, build the fundamental blocks that are needed for solving supply chain, and then go from there. That's how I look at it.
It's the right tool for the right organization at the right time. Chris?
Yeah, I think I agree with Chuck, sort of depending on how you see it, embrace the change, embrace the winds of change, embrace the horror, however you may see it, but I think it's coming. And like I said before, I really do think we're at an inflection point with a lot of what's happening with technology. We'll only continue to see more of it. I think the pace of change is just going to increase that much more. So you can bury your head in the sand and sort of hope that things sort of stay the same, but I think the reality is now almost more than ever, or certainly within this is a generational shift that I think technology is here to stay, and it's going to be pushing on us heavily for at least the next several years, if not foreseeable future.
Absolutely, thank you, Chris. Lilia, I gave you the first word, so circularity. I'll give you the final word.
I'm going to close this out. I'll say that if it's nothing else, have a plan for how your organization is going to play a strategic role within your companies. Everything else is getting automated. It will get automated. So there's a big role to play. Figure out how to play it.
Okay, Lilia, thank you very much. As I said, I've barely scratched the surface of the things I wanted to talk about, but I'm also conscious that coming up after this is a networking break. And if you don't go to a networking break on time, you become deeply unpopular, which I'm not keen on doing on the first day here. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to our panel, to Chuck, to Lilia, to Abby, and to Chris. And thank you so much for joining us here at Procurement and Supply Chain Live Chicago.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. That was fun.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.